I will go ahead and begin the webinar. My name is Andy, and I'm with RezOvation Software. Just so you know, you are all muted for the duration of the webinar, so you're not able to talk over each other. If you do have any questions in the webinar, I would love for you to ask those questions, and to do so, you want to post those in the GoToWebinar question box. And then at the end of the webinar, I will read all of the questions and answers aloud so everybody can hear the questions and answers. Also, after the webinar is over, I will begin activating your reservation web accounts, and then I will send you out an email with your access information and login instructions. So look for that email. If you don't get it, please let us know, and we'll be happy to help you out there. The agenda for today's webinar is to discuss the key transition differences between Reservation GT and Reservation Web, and what you should be aware of or familiar with when you do get into Reservation Web for the first time. The key transition differences that we're going to discuss are the help site, program navigation, the occupancy screen, making a reservation, bookings and guests, templates, reports, rates, and settings. The first thing we want to talk about is to discuss the recommended or required browsers for using Reservation Web. The required browser, if you're on a Windows or PC machine, is Internet Explorer, and that would be version 11 or the newest version, which if you have Internet Explorer, 90% of you will have version 11, but that's just kind of a heads up. For Mac users, you want to use Safari, although older versions of Firefox will work, but we generally suggest Safari. The reason for this browser restriction is due to the fact that the current version of Reservation Web was built on a browser plugin called Microsoft Silverlight that is no longer supported by Microsoft, so browsers like Chrome and Firefox have already ceased to support it as well. The good news here is that this browser restriction is going to be very short-lived because we are very close to releasing a new version of Reservation Web built entirely on HTML and CSS. So it's free of Silverlight, so you don't need that plugin, which means there is no browser restriction, and you can go back using whatever browser you're using, like Chrome, Firefox, Edge, whatever browser you prefer to use. So look for news about that coming in the very near future, and then that browser restriction will be lifted. And the next thing I wanted to discuss is the help site within Reservation Web. You have access to the help site and the articles there within by clicking this help link in the upper right corner of the Reservation Web account. If you do click that link and nothing's happening, what's going on there is a pop-up blocker is preventing the link from working. That could be a pop-up blocker within your browser's preferences or settings. It could also be a pop-up blocker that's built into your antivirus software. So if the link's not working, you want to look into disabling whatever pop-up blocker is interfering there. But once you get into the help site, initially you'll find these two big buttons, one for viewing help articles and one for viewing training videos. There are less training videos, but we are working on getting more of those in there. But there are a ton of help articles there to provide that additional information. And then once you get into the help site, and you're able to peruse the various categories of the help articles. But at the bottom of each article, there are two buttons for accessing further assistance from our support team. There's an email button that will take you to a web form where you're able to type up your issue and submit that to us in case form. That'll be automatically sent to our support suite, where our technicians will be working those cases in the order that they came in and be getting to you as soon as they can. If you're looking for more direct help, click the phone button, and that will give you our phone number if you don't know what that is, and we'll be happy to help you out there on the phones as well. Regarding the information you find within the help site, it does contain a lot of important knowledge that can help you with the weeks following your transition. And while we keep a lot of the processes the same in going from Reservation GT to Reservation Web, it is still a new interface, so you might have some questions that can be answered in the documentation. So next, we are going to discuss the navigation of Reservation Web. First, there are 8 tabs for navigating the system, as opposed to the drop-down menus that you would be used to in Reservation GT. These tabs are occupancy, guests, bookings, gift certificates, reports, rates, templates, and settings. Above these navigational tabs, you will find some additional links. This first, what's listed here is if you see administrator, that's actually not a link, but the user you're signed in as. So that's indicating which user you are. Next is the help button that we've already talked about. And then to the right of that is the feedback button. That will take you to our feedback forum where you can send us functionality requests, improvement requests, suggestions. Just tell us generally things you want us to do differently. And we do check that frequently. Then finally on the right there is the sign out link for exiting your account if you need to do that. Below that sign out link are two universal buttons. We say universal because they appear on each page. That blue arrow, if you click it, it'll drop down a menu that'll give you access to the waiting list manager or out of service manager, so you can manage those waitlist reservations and out of service nights. To the right of it, the green plus button, that's the quick add drop down. It'll give you a menu with three options, one for quickly adding a guest, a reservation, or a retail sale. So this is the occupancy map that we're looking at here. And the first thing I want to talk about is this navigational bar at the top for selecting dates or jumping to dates down here in the occupancy map. This timeline shows the entire database of time. So the longer you've been with us and the more records that you have, the longer that timeline will be because there'll be more years in it. But as you're navigating around this timeline, you'll see a little pop-up menu that'll appear above the cursor that'll tell you what date you're hovering over. Then you can click there to jump to that date on the calendar below. And then these arrows on the left and right are for navigating around that timeline as well, and will adjust the calendar forward or backward. But to the right of that are two additional selectors for jumping around dates on the occupancy map. And this first button that's got a 15 in it, and that'll give you access to a more traditional look. Click and select your date, it'll show it month by month, and you can scroll through those months and then click on a date within that month to jump to that day on the calendar below. If you are anywhere on the calendar and need to go back to the current day, you can quickly do that by just clicking on the Today button, and then it'll jump you right back to the current day. Moving to the right of the date selector options, the first two buttons we have are for setting the grid height and grid width of the rectangles on the occupancy map below. The options there are small, medium, and large, and the smaller you make the grid rectangles, the more reservations and data you'll see on the occupancy map. But the larger you make them, the less you'll see, but the easier they are to read, so that's just a matter of preference. To the right of those are 5 buttons for toggling on various details on the occupancy map. The first one that looks like a $sign will show rates and the room nights on the calendar. The second one that's a star will show minimum night stay settings on the calendar. The third button that looks like a piece of cake, that will toggle on the event strip, which are colored strips that appear below the dates at the top of the calendar. And in settings, you can define special events, name them, set the date range for the special event, and assign a color to it. And then with the event strip on, when that event comes up, you'll see the colored strip appearing across the dates of that event. The fourth button that looks like a sun, that will toggle on the display of disabled rooms on the occupancy map. And by default, any rooms that you have disabled don't show up there. And you probably want to leave it that way so they're not cluttering up your occupancy map. But if you do want to see them, just turn that on. Lastly of these buttons is the sticky note button. When that is toggled on, you'll see a sticky note that'll appear, a single note, that sticky note that you can type in that appears above the occupancy map. And really what it's for is passing on information to other people that would be working on staff, somebody that's coming on shift next. You want to pass them along a message. You can open the sticky note and type it up, whatever your message is there. Dropping down a line and going to the left here, this selector that we have highlighted is for setting the sort order of the rooms on the left. You can sort those by room type, room name, or abbreviation. And one little kind of nice hack for that, if you can't get it to the exact order that you want using our sorting options, you can set it to sort by room name and then just add numbers in front of the room names so that it will sort those alphanumerically, and it will start with the numbers. So that's kind of a trick you can get it in whatever order you want. Across the page, I wanted to touch on this quick actions menu that we have highlighted. The Quick Actions menu was built mostly with Mac users in mind. And I say that because there are a lot of functionality within the Occupancy Map that you can access by right-clicking. However, Mac users, most of them don't have a right mouse button, so so they'd be lacking in that ability. So what we did is, whenever the right click would give you an option to do something in the Occupancy Map, you now have access to that same options in the Quick Actions menu, which can be hidden or expanded. So those can be found there, and just our replacement of the right-click features. And the Quick Actions menu does show up for PC users as well. So it shows up for everybody, but was built mostly with Mac users in mind. Moving on, but staying on the Occupancy Map, I want to talk about this Reservation Detail pop-up window. When hovering your mouse over a reservation, a small detail screen will appear with the basic reservation information. It allows you to see that information without having to fully open that reservation, so it's a really nice time saver. But it also shows where the booking was made by a little icon that appears in the upper right hand of that window. And the icon will have a letter and then a descriptor next to it, and it's telling you where that reservation was made. So if you see an R there standing for reservation, that means that the reservation was made in Reservation internally by you or somebody else on staff, somebody with access to your account. Some of the other designators that you can see there, if you see BE, that stands for Booking Engine. So for users of the Reservation Booking Engine, when a reservation is made online by going through your website and the Booking Engine, that's what you'll see there. If you happen to be using our GDS partner Sabre and are selling your rooms on online travel agent websites like Hotels.com or Expedia, when those reservations come in, they'll say GDS for Global Distribution System. For BedandBreakfast.com online reservation users, if you have that service integrated with RezOvation and a reservation comes through that channel, you'll see BB for BedandBreakfast.com. Lastly, if you do happen to be a user of the Reservations booking engine, one of our sister companies, and that service is integrated with RezOvation, when reservation comes through that channel, you'll see W for Reservations. Staying on the Occupancy Map for one last slide, I want to talk about making a selection, or more accurately, clearing a selection that you've already made. So when you click on the rectangles in the Occupancy Map, they will be selected and they'll turn blue to indicate that you've selected them. And that might have been with the intention of booking those nights or marking them out of service. But if you realize you've made a mistake and you want to clear that selection, there are 3 ways you can go about it. And I personally feel like the easiest way to do it is by pressing the Escape key on the keyboard. That's always what I do because it just seemed like the fastest. But the 2 other options are, one is within the Quick Actions menu. You can click Clear Selections, and that will clear those out. Lastly, you can right-click on them to clear that selection, and then right-click and then click Clear Selection. Okay, moving on to talk about the reservation making process, or specifically the reservation detail screen. On the left-hand side, we've got the Reservation GT example, and on the right-hand side, we've got the Reservation Web example. And there are a ton of similarities here. As far as some of the differences, the room assignment screen in Reservation Web is now laid out vertically instead of a horizontal format. But like I said, a lot of these features are the same. One that we've got highlighted here, Show All Rooms. If you need to add more rooms to an existing reservation and you want to see the other rooms that you have available that aren't tied to this reservation, you still need to check the Show All Rooms box, just like you did in GT. But below this are the reservation lodging details. So you'll see each room that's booked into the reservation, and then below that line, the assigned guest or contact that you've got in that room. Below that is the option for selecting a package to tie to that room if you happen to be a user of packages. And then you do see the room nights that are scheduled to be booked for this room, and then below that you can actually view and change the number of adults or children in the room. And here, this in the middle of the page is showing the selected room nights, and you can click to remove those if you need to, or add nights to it there. But one really nice thing about this is, and one thing that I like, is how large that the pricing details are compared to Reservation GT. On GT, they were just kind of small font tucked in the bottom corner of this window. But Reservation Web, they're big and easy to see right there on the right side, so that's convenient. Below those details, though, are the section where you can adjust the rates for that specific reservation, so that's still a feature. You can still adjust them by fixed amount, percentage. You can set all the room nights to the same price or manually override each room night to its own price. Okay, we're going to move on to talking about bookings and guest tabs. First of all, we renamed reservation list to bookings and contact list to guests. It's just, we thought it was a little more user-friendly. And instead of a long list that you would be used to in GT, we now have formatted these in pages. These pages you can set to show in rows of 25, 50, or 100, and then you can navigate the pages by clicking the single arrows to go page to page or the double arrows to jump to the end or beginning. But up here at the top of each of these page, bookings and guests, you will be able to select your filter. If you want to select a filter, by default you'll see all customers or all sales. But you can select one of the predefined filters, or you can still add a custom filter by clicking that green plus sign. And the custom filters can be saved for later access. As far as some of the other things you can do from these lists, these buttons here are for printing, emailing. As far as guests go, you can merge them. And then these are for deleting records and clearing a selection and selecting all. So there are some various number of features that you can do there in addition to exporting the list to CSV, which CSV is a file format that can be read by Microsoft Excel or other spreadsheet programs. Okay, we're going to move on to talking about templates, or the template editor in Reservation Web, which we're seeing here on the left, marked number 1, and then that same section in GT on the smaller window on the right. But the biggest change to Reservation Web is that Reservation Web has its own editor built right into the system, so there's no need to rely on Microsoft Word to edit your templates any longer. The editor is built right, and you can see at the top you have a toolbox with various tabs that offer the same features that you would be used to in a document writer like Microsoft Word. On the left-hand side are the categories of all the template documents, whether those be reports or email letters. Those documents can be found on the right, and you can get to them by drilling down into the category, then subcategory you're looking for. Creating a new template is just like GT as far as the process goes. You have to select an existing template and then copy it. And then once you're creating the copy, it'll give you the opportunity to give it a new name. And then you can set your new custom document as the default, or you can leave the default on the standard. But the standard will always be locked for editing, so you have that original to go back to, just like in GT, in case something goes wrong and you need to go back to that original. But the document templates in Reservation Web do still use these codes to pull values out of the database for when you're using these documents. And another nice feature about Web is that these codes are accessible from the Insert tab of the toolbox. You can click Insert and then to get to that tab, and then click the All button, and that'll drop down a big list of all the codes available to the document you're working with. And then to the right of each of those codes is that code's descriptor to explain to you what the code means or what value you are going to be pulling out of the database by adding that code to your document. But when you click a code in that list, it will automatically insert it into the document at whatever your current selected cursor position is. So the nice thing about this is that, and if you remember in GT, in order to get access to the code, you had to go to a different page, and then you had to open up that help document that had the list of codes, and you had to select it, copy it, and then paste it into Microsoft Word. So it's much quicker to add the codes in Reservation Web. Okay, we're going to jump over to talking about the Reports tab. And this is one of the more cut and dry sections of the system. And it's got all of the same reports that you had in Reservation GT, and they're accessible via this on the left-hand side where they're categorized, much like we were seeing on the Templates tab. But you can just drill down into the category and subcategory to find the report you're looking for. And once you have found it, you'll discover that we use the same filters and sorting options that are in Reservation GT, and you can still define a date range for your report. There's a quick date selector that's hidden by this template type dropdown, but that's there, just hidden behind it on this particular screenshot. But the dropdown is for selecting either the standard standard report template or a custom report template if you have built a custom report. But then when you click Create Report, it'll open the report right in Reservation Web. And from there, you can export, or you can actually save the report so that you can then open it in Word on your computer if that's something you want to do, if you want to edit the report. So we're going to move on to discussing rates in Reservation Web. The biggest change here, and I'm sure you've already noticed, is that Reservation Web has its own section for rates, a rates tab. Rates and GT are all within program configuration or settings, and so we've taken it out of there and given it its own tab. So this is where you will find rate types, base rates, and rate seasons and adjustments, all accessible here. Up here at the, oops, sorry, jumped back a page. There we go. At the top here is where you can select your rate type if you do have multiple rate types and want to change to a different one. Below this, where we have the highlight, is where we have the hidden base rate section. I say hidden right now because it's in this screenshot it's not expanded, but to expand it, you just click this thin vertical gray bar and it will pop out the base rates for editing. As far as actually making changes to rates throughout a date range or minimum stays throughout a date range or on a specific weekend or blacking out nights, the process still works the same like it did in GT when using rate seasons and adjustments. You make a selection either by clicking on the squares in the map here or using the advanced option for making your room night selection. And then you use update selected values to make that change. When making a selection, you can just click the individual room nights or hold down the mouse button and drag over them to select them. They'll turn blue like they do on the occupancy map when you're making selections. But if you're trying to do that over a large date range, say, that's going to become really cumbersome to do it that way. So you'd want to use the advanced selection method, which will open this window that we've got highlighted in number 2 on the right-hand side. But in the advanced option, you define a date range, select which days of the week you want to be included in your change, and then finally you can select which rooms or rental units you want to be included. But once you've made your selection, all of the selected room nights will be highlighted in blue on the map below, and you're ready to make your change to your selection. So from there, you would choose in this section, update selected values from the update type, whether you want to change rates, minimum stay, or blackout. There's a rare off chance that some of you actually might see availability in this menu. It will only show up for those that had a really unique Reservation GT configuration, so most of you won't see availability there, and availability is just inherently tied to reservations, blackouts, and out of service. But I digress there. Getting back to what I was saying, so once you've selected rates, you could then revert them to the base, set them to a specific number, or make an adjustment by a percentage or dollar amount. If you were making a change to minimum stay, you can revert it to base or set it to a specific minimum night stay setting. And then, of course, blackouts, you're just applying or removing a blackout. Finally, down here in number 3, you'll see that you do still have the option to copy your selection from one rate type to another. If, like I said, you do have multiple rate types, and after making a change, want to copy that change to another rate type, that's the section for doing that. You just select the rate type you want to copy to, and it'll be from whatever rate type that you're on, and then you can do a standard copy or an adjustment of that copy. And before we talk about settings, we're going to talk about logging into your account. First, you can get the process started by going to RezOvation.com and then click the sign on link in the upper right-hand corner. When you do, that'll take you to this page, which the address of is my.RezOvation.com, and this is the sign-in page. You might want to bookmark that address just for quick access. But to get in, you have to enter your account number, your username, and your password. And as I mentioned earlier, you will be receiving that in an email that I will be sending later after this webinar is over. But once you've entered that information, you'll click Login, and it'll take you into your account. Also, here in this screenshot, it's not pictured, but on this login screen is where we also include any special messages we want to get across to our customers. So you might look for any alerts or notices there. When signing in, if you enter your account information correctly, but you don't immediately get taken into your account, and instead you see either this upper message on a PC or the lower one on a Mac machine, what it's trying to tell you is one of two things. Either the browser that you're trying to sign in with is not compatible and doesn't support Silverlight, therefore you can't access Reservation with it, or you are on a compatible browser but don't have the Silverlight plugin installed. So if you're on a compatible browser, Internet Explorer on a PC or Safari on a Mac, and you get this message, it's just trying to tell you that you need to install Microsoft Silverlight, which is a quick to download and quick to install file. It's harmless, so go ahead and click there to install it and download it and install it, and then you'll just need a refresh to get into your account. So we can have a look at the settings screen, and all of the same settings that you had in Reservation GT in the program configuration can be found here. Some of these sections, specifically booking engine settings, were broken down into smaller and easier to manage sections. The biggest difference we've already discussed is that you won't find anything rate related here. The highlight that we have around user accounts, it's a little bit more important in Reservation Web. And I say this because you do have the ability to modify your users' access permissions, which is something you could do in GT as well. But here it's more important because unlike GT, where GT is just installed on one computer or maybe a couple of computers there at the property, Reservation Web can be accessed from any machine in the world as long as you have internet access. So what that means, if you're giving other employees access to your Reservation Web account, it's important that you don't let them have access to anything that they don't need. So you might want to go in there when you get in the first time, look at your users, and if you're giving these employees access to Reservation Web, just make sure that you lock down anything that they don't need to get access to, which you can do in user accounts. You can also add users, delete users, change usernames, and change passwords there as well. We have reached the end of the presentation portion of the webinar, so I'm going to talk about what's coming up next as far as what you should expect. The first two things I've mentioned already, some of this I've mentioned already, but I just kind of want to highlight on this. I will be activating your Reservation Web accounts after the webinar, and once I get them all activated, I will be then sending you all out an email with your access information and login instructions. That can take me up to an hour for larger groups like yours, so give me some time to get that together. But I will be sending out that email. If an hour or so goes by and you haven't got the email, get in touch with us, and we'll be happy to make sure you get access. As far as discontinuing use and disconnecting Reservation GT, uninstalling Reservation GT, once you have successfully logged into Reservation Web and you've become comfortable with the system, you are free to uninstall Reservation GT at your leisure. If you need assistance with it, give us a call. Our staff will help you out with that. Although it's not entirely necessary that you uninstall Reservation on your own, as that we have a plan to automatically disconnect your Reservation software from our servers. The plan is to do that on our end. We do it on Mondays, and we don't do it on the Monday following your webinar. We do it on the second Monday following your webinar. So let me check out my calendar here. But I believe it's the 30th for you folks. So yeah, so October 30th is when your group will have their GT automatically disconnected. So you have until then to get the rest of everybody there brought up to speed on using Reservation Web. That's over a week, about a week and a half, so that should be plenty of time to do that. As far as training the rest of the staff on that, if you need other people to view this webinar and you think that would be beneficial, you can view this webinar over again with my audio and the video presented here just by using the original webinar link we sent you for accessing this webinar. That does also take about an hour after the webinar for me to get that prepared and ready for viewing. So that's another thing you'll need to give me just a little bit of time on, but that is a useful resource if you do need other people to see this. I also want to kind of harp on the help site again. It's an excellent resource and there's tons of knowledge there, so don't forget about it. But of course, if you do have any questions, please get in touch with us if you can't find your answers there, and we'll be happy to help. One thing I did want to let you know is that a common question that comes up a lot is people are wondering if all of their data is going to be brought over from Reservation GT to Reservation Web. And I can say that it all will be brought over. That includes your room configuration, the rest of your settings, your guests, reservations, payment records, templates. All of that is brought over, so your entire database will be there in Reservation Web. Actually, we already had that data because you've all been backing up your reservation data to our servers from Reservation GT. In the event that you would, for some reason, lose that data on your end, you could download it again from us. So we've already had your data, and your Reservation Web account has already existed. It's just a matter of us activating it so you can log into it. This is where we are going to begin the questions and answers portion of the webinar. So I'm going to take a short break here where I'm going to go look and see if there's any questions submitted. Get prepared to start reading those off, and this will also give you time to start submitting these questions. Also, we have some reminders at the bottom of the screen, things that I've already talked about but are important for your first time login. So take a look at those if you have time. And also, if you have questions, find the GoToWebinar question box and start submitting those. And then here in a couple, 2-3 minutes, I will pop back in and we'll start answering these questions. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. I'm going to go ahead and start answering. We actually only have one question right now so far. But the question is, do we need to change the link on our website for people who want to book online? Right now, our website is linked with Reservation GT for people who book directly through our website. The answer to that question is no, you do not need to change the link on your website. It actually works exactly the same and will automatically be tied to your reservation web. So no, you don't need to change the link on your website. As I said, that was the only question I have, so I'm going to give you a couple more minutes to go ahead and submit additional questions, and then if there aren't any, we'll go ahead and wrap up the webinar. I'll be right back. All right, I did have another question come in. That question is, can we copy and paste one year to another for perpetual guests? So I'm assuming what you mean is if you have these guests that come and stay every year, can you just simply click a button to have it recreate the reservation automatically on the following year? And unfortunately, the answer to that is no. You would have to go into the guest record and then create another reservation, although that's a great suggestion and would be a great one, awesome one to add to our feedback form that we talked about earlier. So when you do get in the first time, I would suggest jumping over to that feedback form and posting that suggestion, and then that'll get over to our product managers so they can read that and add that to our feature request list. I didn't have any further follow-up questions to that, so we'll just give it a couple more minutes here. If we don't have anything else, then we'll wrap up the webinar. I'll be right back. Okay, we didn't have any more questions, so we'll go ahead and end the webinar here. I just want to first thank everybody for attending my webinar today, and thank you for choosing to go ahead and move over to Reservation Web now. If you do have any questions about the webinar, you can give us a call. We'll be happy to answer those. Or when you get my access email, you can reply directly to me by replying to that email, and I'll be happy to address your questions. But again, thank you. And this is Andy with Reservation signing off. We'll talk to you next time. Bye.